Okay. All right, everyone, if we could take our seats. We're on air now, so everyone in the online world can actually see us and hear us. Just before we get started, got to cover some basic housekeeping rules. If the fire alarm should go off, we definitely recommend you proceed to the nearest exit, which is usually the one closest behind you, but please look for the exit signs. If you go outside behind you, you can either go to your left and follow the exit signs or go down the grand staircase and proceed out the building. For restroom facilities, again, they're outside the door behind you and proceed to your left. And with that, I think we're going to start the meeting.
Intimate group here, so we're not going to run each other over if we're rushing to the exits. So thank you everyone for coming back and for the ending of the nutrient forms and ratios workshop. I'm going to start by talking a little bit just about process and next steps, and then I'm going to turn it over to the panel to give us their thoughts on what they've heard yesterday and the next steps forward. So out of this workshop is going to be coming a white paper. It's a companion to other white papers that have already been completed for the Delta Nutrient Research Plan. And if here's a blatant plug, if people haven't had a chance to read those yet, they're up on our website. They're excellent papers, the modeling, cyanohabs, and the macrophytes. Also with the latter two, the science work group has put together a knowledge gaps document. So the white paper that's coming out of this effort is the final one that will be completed before water boards and stakeholders then really pull those together into the Delta Nutrient Research Plan. So I've talked to the panel. We're still, I'll say that the end of January is a target for for having a draft of the nutrient forms and ratios white paper. I think they have a really good plan forward here. And then that paper will go out to the stakeholder review. I'm going to ask, just fair warning, probably about a 3-week turnaround time for comments on that. And that's really to keep the rest of the Delta Nutrient Research Plan on track so that we can have that by summer is the idea, to have a draft of that out on the streets. And then the stakeholder and technical review comments, those will go to the panel. They'll have a chance to look at those. And we'll do what we did probably in the other, the white papers. There will be some comments. I expect they may be technical questions or clarification. They can incorporate that directly into the document. Other comments and questions we may append onto a second document. So we'll just have to see how those comments come in. Are there any questions, before I turn it over, are there any questions on process? Hearing none, you can email me if you think of those later. Okay, so now I'm going to turn it over to Amy and the rest of the panel, and they can give us their. We're not giving also caveat, they're not giving a full report out now. I mean, because this process of developing the white paper has just begun. But if they have any comments to share with us, their perspectives of what they heard yesterday, and maybe some insights.
Okay, got it. Hello, my name is Amy Ward. I'm a member of the advisory panel. My home institution is the University of Alabama, and I have sitting to my left. Sorry.
Hans Pearl. I'm with the University of North Carolina's Institute of Marine Sciences in Morehead City, North Carolina, Hurricane Central.
And to my right?
Paul Harrison from University of British Columbia, so I'm the import to the panel here.
And also in the ether around us is Antoinetta Quiggs, who I believe is in Texas. Is that right, Antoinetta?
Galveston.
Galveston? Okay.
Texas A&M and Galveston.
Okay. Okay. She will be with us shortly. I have a few brief comments in terms of our impressions and thoughts at this point. They're still being formed. First of all, however, I would really like to thank the organizations that put this workshop together and the staff who helped organize it. It's really been a pleasure working with Janice and Christine, among others, on this. They've been very helpful and very responsive to what we've needed along the way and listening to us. I would especially like to thank the presenters and the participants in yesterday's workshops. We know it takes time and effort away from one's daily job to come in and prepare these, but as a panel, I think we're in agreement that they were really helpful to us in providing insights. In addition to the papers that were provided to us to read on these topics, it was really a clarifying experience to hear what they had to say, especially with regard, I think, to their identification of their perspectives on knowledge gaps and where they themselves saw potential future research in relation to nutrients in the Delta. As Janice indicated, we're still very much in process. I don't think I need to tell anybody in this room that this is the system we're addressing and is extremely complex. It's complex biologically, it's complex physically, and it's probably one of the most human-manipulated systems in the world. So it's quite challenging. Again, I don't need to tell you this. You're the ones who are dealing with it. It's actually I've always found it to be quite exciting research in terms of what's possible here and the sort of the examples and models that could be set. But with that in mind, we're still digesting information at this stage as a panel on the charge that we have. We did have a very productive discussion this morning, very candid, and we had some additional input from people locally, which was extremely helpful. We are making strides also in the outline that eventually will become the completely fleshed out report, which we will submit as a draft hopefully by the end of January. Having said that, I would like to share with you just some general areas that we feel need to be focused on. This is not complete at this stage, but it was 3 areas that we felt we had consensus on and could confidently say we think there needs to be more focus in these particular broad general areas. If you do not hear something from me at this point in an area that you think is important, that doesn't mean that we're not including it. We're still going through and vetting various research topics and themes, but we want to reflect more thoroughly on those before we say anything definitive. So that's the reason for what will seem like very brief comments right now. After I make these comments, I'll hopefully members of the panel who want to add anything to my comments or disagree with me or whatever are free to do that. So the first of them, we really believe that focusing on broadening the investigations to understand the Delta system as a whole will be beneficial. And among these benefits of doing that, we think are putting the existing research, especially the most recent experiments, in a much needed real-world context. So the emphasis is broadening the research themes and directions in order to do the best science that will move toward the best management of the system. So that's our overarching goal here in the broader context from which we're working at this point. Secondly, as a general focus area, in addition to looking at nutrient biological linkages, we think that a focus on linking nutrients also more vigorously to physical aspects would be beneficial, including such physical aspects as light, temperature, water residence time, drought, and hydrology. And certainly the latter two, well, several of them in that list, can be linked to ongoing climate change and its impacts on the system. And thirdly, and very importantly, we think a focus on models that link hydrodynamics, biogeochemistry, and trophic dynamics are especially important, along with more modularized models that target specific areas. Finally, overall, we think a focus on taking advantage of emerging technologies such as sensor networks to further define nutrient sources, distributions, and transformations will be particularly important, especially among other things, identifying possible hotspots for nutrient transformations. So at this point in time, that's what we put on the table. We're continuing to make progress. We'll be communicating among ourselves after we leave Sacramento over the next couple of months, exchanging drafts among us, and elaborating and further fleshing out categories under these three broad areas. So I'd like to, if other panel members have anything to add to what Janice and I have said at this point, please feel free to do it.
I might just add that, you know, the focus of the research has been very much on nitrogen, obviously, but I just wanted to assure you that we haven't forgotten about phosphorus either, particularly the relationships between nitrogen and phosphorus, and that's going to be very critical in relation to management actions that are going to be taken or are being taken to reduce nitrogen, for example. So don't worry, we are also going to include issues with phosphorus like N to P ratios, for example, how those are changing that might impact production, community composition of the primary producers, and ultimately issues potentially with nutrient limitation and changes therein. So I just wanted to emphasize that whereas there has been a lot of discussion about nitrogen, obviously, and that was one of the tasks that we were asked to address, you know, there are phosphorus measurements being made, so the database is there. I think that ultimately some of those recommendations will deal with what's happening with phosphorus as well.
I think Janice has mentioned number 3, the models, the hydrodynamic models. I think, personally, I think this is quite urgent to speed this up and move on this direction. Models are, once the model is up and running, it's a great way to test ideas, and this could drive further research. So this estuary, especially the Delta Park, is really complex. I've worked in other estuaries which are pretty straightforward, and the models help to see how the interaction takes place with all of these various parameters. So hopefully, I know there have been some progress already on the models, but this really will help in terms of designing the most cost-effective research in the future.
One more comment about the models. I think that having more integrative models between biology, physics, and chemistry will also help us identify issues that may have been ignored or missed in what's controlling production, primary production in the system. So the models will be useful in terms of synthesizing the data, but also potentially identifying areas that we haven't thought about or missed that are needed in the greater context of understanding the relationship between nutrients and how the system is responding. And we didn't hear much about climate effects in climate change at the sessions that we had yesterday, but we're all well aware of how this part of the world is being impacted by climatic changes, particularly changes in hydrologic patterns, rainfall patterns. I don't need to tell you that, the droughts, and also increases in temperature, all of which really impact some of the water quality responses that we're seeing, including some of the harmful algal bloom issues that are present from the headwaters down to the bay.
One more follow-up to models again. So you have some really wonderful data sets here, and you have some unusual natural events. I call them nature's experiments. And so with this good data set, and once the models are up and running, you can actually begin to test these models to see how good they are and do they capture these unusual events in particular years. So I think that this will be really, really useful where we could do experiments in the lab, we could do experiments in the mesocosm, we could move down the river, but there's nothing like nature's large-scale experiment that's free once you actually have captured these data sets in order to test your models. So we see great promise in that whole linkage between the physics and your data sets and the biology.
Is Antonetta on the line? Antonetta, do you have any comments on what we just said here?
No, I don't. Sorry. I think you guys have captured it well.
Thank you. So we are a small group, and I'm not sure everyone had a chance maybe to, we could open it up for discussion now. In particular, the panel asked the presenters 2 questions yesterday, and those were, what do folks see as key both knowledge gaps and in our current understanding, and what are critical future directions? So if now that folks who were here yesterday, if you've had a chance to think about the presentations and had some, are there any additions that you would want to give the panel? Any thoughts about those 2 questions in addition to what they heard yesterday? Any thoughts? What you see as knowledge gaps, key knowledge gaps, or, and it can be an echo of something that was said yesterday, key knowledge gaps or future directions? It's a chance to broaden the discussion. Oh, good.
I would just add that one of the things that we kind of know is that we make a lot of measurements of phosphate, nitrate, chlorophyll, but we don't do a whole lot of rate measurements to understand what's really happening. We need more rate measurements, especially for models. So that's, I think, something we need to work on. Measuring primary productivity now can be done automatically. You know, lots of things like that could be more helpful here.
This is Chris Foe. When we do our monitoring, we have a lot of organic nitrogen and phosphorus in the system. And I'm very perplexed as to its bioavailability and fate.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, particularly if there's a long travel time for some of these sources coming into the system, which gives, you know, enough time to cycle it and potentially make it available. The whole issue of organic nitrogen in particular is becoming a lot more prominent in estuarine and coastal studies because it's something we've kind of ignored as a potentially biologically available source of nitrogen. And it must be getting used or cycled, or we'd be up to our eyebrows in it in the coastal ocean. So, it's a very good point, and we will definitely include that in the bigger picture in terms of considering nitrogen. And potentially phosphorus too, but certainly nitrogen.
Sort of falls under the general theme of broadening the research areas.
Thanks, Christine. Tom Grovog with Larry Walker Associates. I guess in the category of knowledge gaps and in the area of management, and it plays into what you've talked about with the utility of models, but it seems that a knowledge gap that we need to fill is our ability to manage the system. This whole effort is really born from the regional board's charge to consider setting nutrient water quality objectives, which really then leads to various management actions. So when you think about the models, think about management measures that you could model to predict ambient levels or other outcomes in the delta, which then connect into some of the problems that you've heard about, the ability to control cyanobacteria, macrophytes, phytoplankton, food web. So I don't know if that fits as a knowledge gap, but that's certainly one thing that we've talked about at the stakeholder level as a key component of the work that's being done.
Be practical. Yeah. So.
Hi, Laura Volpe with the State and Federal Contractors Water Agency. One of the things that I heard yesterday or heard a discussion of is the role of shallow water habitats. And there's supposed to be quite a bit of wetland restoration going on in the Delta, required and add-on. And so to me, that was a knowledge gap about what the role that plays currently and what it might play in the future. This dynamic.
I think this is part of the complexity of the estuaries, and this one certainly does have a lot of shallow habitat. And so, yeah, I think we agree that besides looking at these channels, these shallow areas need to be looked at, both from sort of nutrient bottom up and the clam grazing, top down issues.
Anyone else? And I can say that I won't speak for the panel, but we did talk, Peggy mentioned rate processes, and that was among the conversations definitely this morning of both what we learned from them and broadening our use of them.
Models will need those rates. So yes, we definitely need that.
It's not a question so much as for the first point you make of broadening the science of people investigating phytoplankton and nutrient dynamics. Do you have a few examples of areas that would help broaden that? And I'm sure it'll come out with the report, but just to show us what you're thinking at this moment.
Well, one of them, I think it arose a bit with the other question, is looking at total nitrogen species, chemical species, would be one, along with the dissolved inorganic nitrogen, organic nitrogen, transformations, hotspots of metabolic activity. I think getting an overall more substantive view of the landscape, maybe the waterscape of the Delta in terms of what's going on where and what critical areas have impact or the most significant impact in terms of nutrient transformations.
Yeah, I would just second that. And land use changes are intimately tied in with changes in the different forms of nitrogen too. So I think what you're going to get back from us ultimately is a more inclusive consideration of nitrogen as total nitrogen, as the total nitrogen pool. we know from many other studies in other parts of the world that the proportions of these different forms of nitrogen are changing in response to different land use changes, agricultural practices, even different procedures for handling waste. So that's part of the broadening issue that we're definitely will address in our report.
Another issue is the light, which comes up over and over again, and so light is seasonal in terms of the onset in March and April, but also changes in the water quality. The turbidity is changing, so we need to track that to see what kind of effects it has, and any back to sort of mixing hydrodynamics and various flows and things like that. So light interacts particularly with nutrients and particularly with night and carbon fixation. So we need to sort of understand more of the role of light in this sort of primary productivity sequence.
Well, I like your, recommendation to expand the discussion a bit. I'm thinking it might be interesting, although we've got our hands full with linked models in the Delta, but to look up into the watershed a bit, especially on the San Joaquin River side. There's some really interesting stuff that goes on in the upper parts of the river. Be kind of curious to see, what role nutrients have in transformation, because the Delta just doesn't stop at Vernalis. There's a lot of stuff that goes on up there, and a lot of what happens in the Delta depends on the upstream processes too.
I just wanted to follow up a little bit on what Laura told you about some of the restoration projects that are going on in the Delta. So you have the Delta of 740,000 acres, and you have about 30,000 acres of restoration that are being planned over the next 3 to 5 years. About 15 projects that are going to be focusing on tidal wetland, and that'll be about 13,000 of those 30,000 acres. The other 17,000 acres of restoration are actually reconnecting floodplain to the river. And these are actually systems that are intermittent systems that will be occasionally reconnected. And so some of the algal blooms that you saw that were emanating out of that part of the Delta were because of that basically intermittent system becoming wetted on occasion. And so it'd be interesting to see whether that aspect of a potential source of nutrients is playing a significant role in the production. There's also an ongoing effort to try to understand the primary production of the system historically and the primary production of the system currently, with an eye to what the restoration will do relative to its changes in aquatic primary production. So there's some interesting ongoing research that if you're interested in, I'm sure some of us can direct you to some of that. But the Eco-Restore effort, which is 30,000 acres, is probably the major effort at doing restoration. And it's predominantly in two forms: tidal restoration and floodplain reconnection restoration.
Hey, thanks. I just wanted to echo Sam's comments there about including some more on the San Joaquin. We really did have a lot of input from folks on the Sacramento side yesterday, and wanted to make sure that that came out, that the San Joaquin was also very important. And the other thing I wanted to kind of call to your attention was something Monet touched on yesterday about the difference between whether or not some of these method differences were amenable to us combining some of this information or not, because she alluded to her opinion that it was mostly interpretation of the data. But if you could help those of us who are not specifically nutrient specialists to understand where it might be appropriate and maybe inappropriate to combine that kind of information, that would be very helpful.
I don't want to prolong people sitting here, and maybe conversation will get fostered again if we break the formal and just talk informally. But Any other thoughts? Anything for the, so I just want to say thank you, and there'll be other chances. Looking forward to more input when the draft paper's ready. So thank you, everybody.
For those of you that are online, we are now ending our webcast. Thank you.